Well, as it says, this is the third recorded lecture as we start the spring 2022 semester. I had thought that I would get to this part on lecture two, but I stopped. And so I hope that you're following along. I hope that you've already seen lectures one and two. I'm actually pretty happy that it broke here because this should be definitely should be shorter, but it's all about one important topic, and it's a huge one. I'm going to guess that most of you care about your grades and that most of you want to succeed. Well, the other part of that is it's also a pretty good idea if you learn something along the way. So, learning, understanding, being able to use information, and applying that on a test are all good things. And one of the problems I had going through college, even though went to graduate school and everything and started taking courses in education, because a weird thing about me, and there's a lot of weird things about me, is that I have a teaching certificate for I think fifth grade through 12th grade. So fifth graders all the way through middle and high school in all the sciences. And I got that along with my PhD. And if you don't know, to be a professor, you do not have to have any training at all in teaching. In fact, by far, only a tiny percentage of professors have any formal teacher training, and you would expect that most of those people are in the education department. So, no one ever talked to me about how to study, at least that I remember. Nothing ever sank in, and I sure wish someone had. I discovered some of these methods on my own, and some of these, and this is important to hear, came from students in my classes who told me strategies that they used to be successful. So I want to talk about that, and that is this third lecture. I'm tucking this in here too, and hopefully after this lecture, we'll be able to get together and actually have lectures in person. There will be one more, a fourth lecture that's recorded that is the lab intro. So I'm just counting these as regular lecture, and then there's that lab intro for the sponge phylum Perifera, that you'll need to see before the 18th of January. Yep, 18th of January also is good for you to have gotten through these, so you'd be ready to go in lecture and ready to go in lab on the 18th, unless the college makes some other plans. And we understand that there are a lot of hardworking people at Blackburn trying to make the best of this deadly situation with COVID. Oh my goodness. All right, let's get back to the topic here. Of course, you got to study for this class. You got to study for all your science classes. By the way, sometimes students complain that there's a lot to know in this class, and there is a lot to know in this class. But sometimes they think that it's unusually hard, and I want to make the case that because I spell everything out for you, I show you exactly what you need to know, that it may seem like more. That if I just assigned the first chapter to you and asked half the questions on the test without you having any clue as to what I wanted you to know from chapter one, that actually could appear to be easier because you didn't have anything specific to do. I'm giving you very, very specific tasks because I care about you, because I want you to succeed. I want the ability for you to succeed to be in your hands. And that includes this topic today. You have to adjust your studying methods to the particular class. Of course, the way you study for a philosophy class or a writing class and how you prepare is altogether different than chemistry and math, and we'll toss in biology just as well. So I'm talking about methods that are particularly suited for this class. First of all, as you're learning new methods on how to study, you should talk to the TAs. They are spectacular resources, and obviously they did very well in my classes. And you, I would guess, want to do very well in my classes. So wouldn't it be a good idea to talk to someone who recently did very well in my classes? They were hired because they did very well, they're friendly, and they really, really, truly want to help you. Now, when you think of those three TAs, and see if you can think of their first names. So we got Jasmine. She's senior. She's a senior and is the senior most assistant. Then Morgan Zobrist, senior just as well. and Cheyenne, who's a sophomore, who was just in your position last year. All of them genuinely want you to help. You should know that the most common conversation I've had with my TAs is, what more can we possibly do to help you succeed? We literally just are frustrated because we think we're doing everything we can, and of course it's college, and so once we do all we can, we're expecting that you're in turn going to do your part and try to then use whatever advice we've given you, and of course tailor it to your own needs. You got to read a lot for this class. You just have to note that. I already talked about the fact that essentially half of every lecture exam comes from the textbook. One of the things that I've routinely done, I hope to do it again this year, is that after you take your first lecture exam and get your score back and then have a chance to look at the test, I ask you to write a reflection. It doesn't have to be really long, about, how did you prepare and how happy are you with your grade and what might you do differently. And I, on those reflections, have had students tell me they didn't read the book at all. Now, you could guess that those are students all who flunked, and it's important to note they flunked really bad, right? So a flunking grade in here is below a 60. These are people who got 30 and 40 out of 100 points, all right? And they've told me flat out, yeah, I just sort of wanted to see how the first test looked before I started studying. And I thought, wow, that's a quarter of all the regular lecture exams, and you're just blowing it away. So I've seen some really foolish things that people have done, and you need to know there is not a lot of time for you to recover in this class. The points come, the points go, and it all starts piling up, and soon you may lose your chance to get an A or some other really good grade. Some of that content, of course, in the textbook is something we did not discuss in class, and you need to know that reading and learning on your own is essential for your professional preparation. So you're welcome. All right, now really to some details. I want to talk about this. One of the most important things that you have to figure out is summarized as self-assessment. It means, how do you know what you know? Okay. What do you know for the upcoming quiz? So someone might say to you, do you feel prepared? I have no idea how most students answer that question. It's a guess. It's probably a feeling. How do you know that you know what you need to know for the upcoming test? Okay, so you must identify first and foremost what you need to know. Oh my goodness, I don't know how many of you have taken a test, got it back, and went, oh my gosh, I didn't know that we had to study this, or I didn't know that that was assigned, or something was unclear and I didn't get to it. Okay, if you want to get, if you want to get a really good grade, you simply must first, before anything else, know what you need to know. This sounds like maybe just kind of silly words and stuff tossed together. But I want you to know what I've spent time on the last lecture trying to do is make sure you understand fully the assignment. And the reason I have so many objectives on chapter 1 is so that you know exactly what I want you to know out of the first chapter. I had teachers, seriously, who would assign 5 chapters. Yeah, those first 5 chapters are on the test. And that was it. In 11 years of college, I took straight 11 years of college. In those 11 years, I had 1 class that had objectives. And you can guess that I did particularly well in that class. And it was anatomy, no less. Okay. Well, when that person assigned 5 chapters, I wondered, well, what do you want me to know? You want me to know just the big concepts? You want me to know figure numbers? You want me to know the name of the artists who drew the pictures? You want me to know page numbers? I mean, don't be silly, but goodness gracious, I had no idea. And so here's the real important part. Nobody did the reading. Because we were so frustrated by not knowing what we needed to know, we just didn't do it. And it seemed to me that that was a complete failure. And now the best part. That was in an education class. That was in a class of a professor supposedly teaching me how to teach. I can't imagine a worse teacher. Okay, it was horrible. And I'm so unhappy with the training I had with people who did not do what they advised. Okay, say, what do you need to know? What do you now know? That's the next thing. That's the self assessment. Of what you got to know, how much do you already know? Okay. And then obviously that means, what do you still need to learn? Well, how on earth are you going to do that? For many, that means you need to come up with a quizzing system, an incredibly thorough quizzing system to check your understanding and your knowledge. Okay, so sometimes it's just terminology, sometimes it's functions, sometimes it's comparing terms, sometimes it's steps in a process. Okay, you can start looking at what you need to know in those ways. Is something I need to know a concept like diffusion or osmosis? Is something I need to know like the parts, like the bones of the human arm? Is something I need to know the steps? So what are the stages of mitosis in order? Okay. Do I need to compare something? And for example, you might know there's actually three types of muscle in our bodies: cardiac, smooth, and skeletal. So you might compare those. And the way you quiz yourself might be structured based on the type of a question. And of course, definitions, right? Some of you know about Quizlet or other apps that you can use to quickly create these kind of quizzes. I caution you not to be using somebody else's questions because, especially if it's not from this class, it's very unlikely to be very helpful and to apply, because this is an introductory class where we do a lot of things. Okay, so guys, here's what I'm saying. As you study for anything, you have to have your own system that tells you, how do I know what I know? Okay. Now, there are lots of publisher-provided materials that you pay for, where you go online and you get quizzed about a chapter, and that's sometimes very successful. In fact, for my human anatomy phys class this spring, we follow the textbook very closely. And for those students, if they pay for one of these online helper study systems, there are all sorts of questions that pretty thoroughly test you over the information in those chapters. So lucky for them, that works out. That's not so much what we're doing here. And I suggest you talk to the TAs. Each has their own style, and ask them, how did you do it? Okay. Talk to Cheyenne. What did she just do last year under all these difficult circumstances of COVID, right? So that's important for you to understand. So, quizzing yourself over things that you should know. And so, in the first lecture, I told you things and you wrote down notes, I hope. Have you already reviewed that in some way? Do you know if you know it? Well, am I simply going to ask you to repeat back things that I said in class? Well, you can guess from my tone of voice, probably not. So, here's a sample way for you to reflect on what I've already taught you, with a question that requires that you use some of the information, not just repeat it back. So here's the question. Which of the following, and it can be more than one, is found in most species of animals? You can read the question. So here's the multiple choice question. So you can pause this right now, and I'm not going to pause very long here. The question is, would we say that most animal species have a head? Would we say that's true? And have bones or have lungs? Or do most animal species fly? Do most animal species have blood? Do most animal species have 2 or 4 legs? Do most animal species make their own body heat? More than one of these can be true. And you should be able to answer this based on what I talked about in the first recorded lecture, the Introduction to Zoology. Okay, this is a good place to pause and to think about things, because I'm about to give you a really big hint on the answer. So if you really wanted to be tested, stop right here. Do it now. Okay, now I'm going to more or less go over the answer. Here's essentially the answer, guys. It's a picture. A picture of what? A picture of an insect. What percentage of animal species are insects? Well, that's something I said that you can just repeat back, and the answer is 70%. So the list on the left, you answer based on what insects have. Do most animals have 2 or 4 legs? No, they're insects. Most animals are insects. They have 6. Do most animals make their own body heat? Well, insects, sometimes when they're very, very active, will make their own body heat. But then when they're quiet and still, they don't. And that's why insects at night are often not very active. There are certain ones that have to come up with other systems. How about blood? Do insects have blood? We haven't talked about it. The answer is yes. Can they fly? Well, here's 2 pair of wings. Do they have lungs? No, they actually don't. We haven't talked about their tracheal system, a series of tubes like air ducts going from the outside to the inside of their body. But no, most of them don't have lungs. Do they have bones? Well, it's an insect. We said they have an exoskeleton, and that means a hard shell on the outside and a chewy nougat center on the inside. And finally, how about a head? Do most animals have a head? Well, insects are most animals, and insects have a head. So, I really want you to look at this because this is an example of the kind of questions I'm going to ask. You have to think. I got a question going most animals. To answer this, you'd have to think, well, what do most animals look like? The answer is insects. Okay. All right, back to study methods. I've written a big handout called As You Begin. Okay. And that handout, which is posted on the portal. So I think I said it was item number 6. I'm looking at it right now. It says on the portal, BI 201, Spring 2022, Dr. Zelisko Study Advice. And it's, if you open the document, the document is actually titled As You Begin. And the little narrative that I have on the portal says this document contains, listen closely, my best tips for how to study for zoology and other science courses. Now, I'm going to spend more than a week here talking about studying. We're going to go on, hopefully in person, and I'm going to give you additional clues. I'm going to finish today, and then we're going to talk about some more things about what you might want to do when you study. When I'm done, and that'll be pretty much the first week of this class, that's it, guys. I've given you all my good stuff. Got it in writing, some of it with pictures. Okay. Here's something that regularly happens in this class. About halfway through the semester, someone's doing horribly. And they come to me and say, do you have any ideas? Think about that. I just told you, this is my best stuff. I am not saving back better advice. That would be cruel. That would not be something that would help my students. I want you to do well, so I'm telling you at the start of my class how I think you might be able to do well, and I recommend you talk to TAs who've already done well, okay? So this is it. Get ready. Here's the advice. Lucky you. This year it's recorded. And I think this is the first time in about 35 times I've taught the class that this is recorded. So holy cow, am I going to send you back to this YouTube video. So what follows right now, I'm calling Beyond As You Begin. This is more study advice that I'm adding on that's a little bit of a physiology. So here we go. And I'm so happy that you have this recorded. We can look into some research from psychology and biology and learn about the effectiveness of studying practices, things that we can do. Okay? So there's lots of research into this, guys. So here's point 1. You cannot eat a turkey in one sitting. Well, now let's be clear. Well, how big's your turkey? Okay, I'm talking about a regular Thanksgiving turkey. We're going to put one in the 15 to 20 pounder. So when I'm talking about a turkey, I'm talking about a big one. Okay? Most of you, even if I offered you like a large amount of money, $1,000 if you can tonight eat without throwing up an entire 15 to 20 pound turkey, it's probably not actually possible. Okay? You would probably throw up or otherwise make yourself horribly sick. But could you eventually eat a turkey? You cannot eat a turkey in one sitting, but could you eat a whole turkey yourself? Well, first of all, let's get past the idea of whether or not you'd want to do that. But could you? Well, yeah. How would you do that? You'd eat a little bit every day. Okay? You'd eat a little bit of turkey every day. So, when you're studying and you have a lot to learn, can you learn it all the day before? The answer is no. 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 There isn't some little trick. You don't put the book under your pillow, okay? There's just not some silly thing you can do. You can't have it reading to you while you sleep. There's not a trick. We do not know how you could do that. It's going to take a little bit every day for a lot of days, okay? Now, a little fun thing that we do as my courses go on is people will ask me, hey, Dr. Zelisko, is that upcoming exam, is that a one turkey or a two turkey exam? And we laugh about it. And sometimes the bad news is it's a two turkey test. And that means you got a lot to learn and you really need to get started right away. Now, related to this for studying is that we know, and this is huge, that as you learn things, your cells in your brain, your neurons, actually change. So you might think, well, is it like a computer where it's sending signals, maybe through chips and things, but the physical configuration of the computer chips, to my knowledge, is not changing. Okay? That's not the case of our brain. Our neurons actually grow and they make connections and they lose connections. And so here's the huge point, guys. There's actual biological change to your brain. This takes time, just like growing up takes time. And that's why you cannot eat a turkey in one sitting. You can't study a lot of material and know it in one day. Why? Because those neurons literally need time to regrow and make new connections and lose other connections. Okay? They have to have that time. And now the fun part, I always just delight on this, and I really mean it's a really fun idea for me. You are using those neurons that we're talking about right now as you read these words, and it's these neurons that are thinking about themselves. So your neurons in your head right now are trying to understand what you need to do to help them. So I think those little neurons in your brain are yelling at you going, would you listen to him? You need time. You got to let us grow. You got to feed us, man. You got to feed us and let us grow and do our things. Okay? And related very much to this is that as these neurons grow and change their connections, we now know that sleep is an important part of studying. Sleep. You need to learn something and then sleep. And when you think about sleep here, in the analogy I developed with the turkeys, think about sleep as digestion. So if you really want to learn how to study well, you have to kind of understand how you learn. Okay? So I tell you something. You hear me? Okay, I understand. There's 70% of all animals are insects. Okay, great. Okay. Now, does it stick? Does it last in your mind? Okay. Well, we know that repeating information helps. We also know that these neurons are going to make connections that help you to remember that 70% of all animals are insects. And we know that those neurons will make reconnections that require periods of sleep. So really think about this. You may have heard the phrase sleep on it. If you have a big decision to make, sleep on it. Okay? And you may know that you've sent an email on night before, and when you wake up, maybe have some regrets. Okay? That's something that you learn as you grow up. Maybe don't send that angry email just before you go to sleep. Well, when you wake up, your hormones are different, so you may not be so excited. But in addition, you literally wake up, guys, with a different mind. You have new little neuronal connections. You have literally made connections of information. And that helps to cement or anchor information in your mind. Okay. One of the things that students do who cram is they put a whole bunch of information in their head, and then they don't get a time to sleep, because that's what the cramming thing is. You don't sleep. And then when they get to the test, they tell me they got confused. They said they thought they knew it, but they're confused. And the reason they were mostly confused is because even though they could recall the facts, they couldn't understand the relationships between the facts. So here I asked you a multiple choice question that required, first of all, that you remembered that most animals are insects. And then you had to use that information to recall details of insects. Okay, that's connecting information together. That requires the sleep. So cramming doesn't work unless it's for the most basic kind of dumb exam that's just asking you to repeat facts. And I don't want to do a lot of that. Now, the neurons, as they're doing all this work for you and reconnecting and helping to cement memories or anchor memories, they're real biological little critters going on in there. They're cells. And so what they're going to need is a fuel, usually sugar, or there's many other molecules. It can be fuels, and oxygen, right? But like everything, you got to do it in moderation. Okay? So breathing from an oxygen tank doesn't mean you don't have to study much. Eating a pound of sugar doesn't make you brilliant, okay? And I think most of you know that. But on the other hand, don't study when you're hungry. So as you go and think about your day and your week in the semester ahead, I hope that you develop a schedule. And you'll have times when you put aside to study. I hope that's not just before a meal. Okay? And we're going to talk about those kind of things in the coming next couple of lectures. Of course, you got to breathe, but that also means to make sure you're in a place that isn't stuffy, a place that has low airflow. And sometimes that's like a library. And so you have to be careful about that. Sometimes a quiet place to study doesn't have very good airflow. Mood lighting. So some of you know that lighting can keep you from calming down and relaxing. And some of you know that an iPhone, I think the other phones, all have features now where you can control this. But at certain times of the day, the color of the lighting on your phone can shift. And we know that there are certain wavelengths that are more likely to keep you awake. And you would guess that many of those wavelengths are in sunlight. So there's a type of lighting that's nice and calming and relaxing, but that may not be good for mental stimulation. So be careful about it. Be careful not to develop your lighting such that you want to go to sleep and not study. Next, this is a repetition of something I harped on just before. And that is, you got to know what to study. And then you got to study that. And you got to know, you got to self-assess, what do you not know? And that's what you should spend your next time studying. Many times listen, this is weird. Many times students study things they know. Yeah, I don't know why, but I think one factor is it makes you feel good. When you read stuff, you go, yeah, I know that. Good. And now you build your confidence. But it turns out you need to spend your time on what you don't know. Okay? And we're going to talk a little bit more about that, and that's what I've got as well on the written sheet, which is As You Begin. Now, one of the neat things about developing techniques, and I've got some that I recommend to you on that document, As You Begin, that's on the portal, I give you a method of quizzing yourself, of creating quizzes over everything that you have to know. And then as you quiz yourself a question at a time, you sort them into stacks. One stack is stuff you got right today, and the other stack is stuff that you got wrong. And now when you go through all the questions, you have two stacks. Stuff you know already, stuff you got wrong. You should not be studying the stuff you know already any more time today. You can come back to that tomorrow and repeat it again. Just pick up the stack of what you don't know, and you should study that. And my advice generally is go through those questions a second time, again sorting things now that you got right and things you've missed now twice. And when you look at that pile, I hope it's a small pile, of stuff, questions that you missed twice, you got to work on that information. You got to go read more about it. You got to talk about it. You got to do something. You got to make it meaningful, okay? But when you get all the questions right that you've created so far for the upcoming test, you're done. So one of the things I like to ask students is, when you study, how do you know when you're done? Sometimes people say, well, I read all my notes, or I read the chapter. Well, that's good, but do you know your notes? And do you know what's in the chapter? And if they don't have a way to self-assess, a way to look at that, well, then they don't know. One final mistake people make is that they multitask, okay? So you might be looking at your phone right now and doing other things. Somebody right over there could be talking to you right now. Don't do that. Don't. You need to concentrate. Most of us do one thing well. All sorts of people are really, really busy, and they try to do two things well. They might try cooking and talking. And that, if you've ever tried following a recipe and talking to somebody about something detailed, that's really tough to do because your mind really focuses just on one thing. And you can kind of mix back and forth, but what we know is you can do one thing well and two or more things pretty poorly, okay? So what we want you to do when you study is to do one thing well. And by the way, some people like to listen to music, and I can imagine there are ways that can be helpful. But you need to understand it also might be a distraction. If you're singing along with the music, okay, if there's a lot of words, if it's a rap song or something that you really get into, okay, or if it brings up emotions, maybe it's a song you're listening to and you broke up with somebody and that song came on. Maybe it's disturbing like that, okay? Or maybe the music makes you want to stop studying and do something else, okay? You're motivated to exercise or something. Got to think about that, guys. Do you really want to be listening to music that is ultimately distracting you? All right, a few more basic mistakes. Here's somebody multitasking. This is real life, okay? Look at this person. They're doing three things. I don't know what they're reading. They're trying to understand something. They're trying to talk to somebody on an old phone that's giant. And meanwhile, they've got a small child they're trying to take care of. And I became a grandparent in 2021. And I can tell you, there are a lot of business. There's a lot to be done when you got a young toddler. So this is way too much, okay? Here's the other mistake. When I ask people, and I could have started all of these lectures about this, and I often do in the class when we're in person, I'll ask people to raise their hand, and I will if we get together. I just have a question. I say, raise your hand if this is true. And I'll say to people, when most of you study, when you study most of the time, do you read your notes? Is that how you study? And most of the time, most of the class says yes. So here's the problem with reading your notes as your way of studying. How do you know that you know anything in your notes? Students tell me that things sound familiar. I'm about to say something really big, so lean in here. When you read your notes, is that at all like a lecture exam? Do you think I'm going to have questions and say, just read this paragraph and tell me if it sounds familiar? If yes, just check it and move on. Or am I going to ask you questions about what you're reading? Yep. When you're reading your notes, are you answering questions? Probably not. There are some people that might have been trained in a note-taking strategy where you sort of split the page and you write notes on one side and then you come back later and you write questions about those notes. That's good. That's the process I'm suggesting. But if you're simply reading notes You don't know what you know. And this is where I'm telling you, I think students go back and read their notes several times and stuff sounds familiar and you go, yeah, I got that. Really? Do you know that you have it in the way that you have to have it on a test? I don't know. I don't know. I doubt it. Okay. Here's advice on what to do. I want to give you some more advice. I don't have much left here. Good news. On advice for studying. What you notice in common about these two pictures, a really cool, tiny little kind of cabiny room on the right. Actually, that's really attractive to me, especially because it's looking out on a tree. And over here on the left, first of all, it's attractive to me because it's got an Apple computer. Yay. And it has a window. Both of these situations have windows, and I strongly recommend studying in front of a window. Now, this is an eye strain problem if you're reading on a computer, just to tell you, because you're looking at a darker screen and you got bright light coming in, and so you got a glare behind your computer. So maybe you wouldn't want to, on a bright sunny day, be doing this. But if you're quizzing yourself over something, this is a good situation, or if you're writing down questions or composing. And if you're writing down questions, maybe you put your computer off to the side over here and you're writing here, and then you can glance off out of the window. I suggest that when you're studying, you need to find a place with a window. And now this is important, and I'm really detailed about this, guys. When you look out the window, don't have it something specific you're looking at that's interesting. In fact, it's better if you're far away from whatever you're seeing. And trees, unless there's a lot going on in your tree, right? Unless there's birds that are building nests and having babies, or who knows what's going on with the critters in your tree. Unless it's a busy tree, a tree is really good because it's kind of abstract. You're just kind of looking at the tree, unless it's botany, and then you're really interested in it. So the idea is that you, and I'm about to describe this, you do your work at your desk, and then you take many frequent breaks. I mean, sometimes every minute, sometimes every 5 minutes. And the idea is that when you take a mental break, you look out the window at no particular anything. You're just staring and you're not really thinking. Okay? So let me describe this in some steps. This is my advice for reading. This is for reading textbooks. This is not for pleasure reading a novel or something that really is for your enjoyment, and not a book that you're remembering all the little details. Okay? I, by the way, describe this method for reading a book. I've never been trained to do this, but it's something that I find effective and others have found effective. And I have had students, after what I'm about to present to you, I've had students come back to me and tell me that it was transformative, that they have absolutely learned something here that is changing the way and the effectiveness of them reading college textbooks. Okay, so you got to have a textbook. We're going to use it for both the lab and lecture. It's a really big textbook, and you should know it's the #1 book in the United States for biology majors learning general biology. Okay, it's the Campbell book, and I've worked with it a couple editions ago. I was the author of the test bank, and I wrote or edited, I didn't write, but I edited and categorized and rewrote 6,000 multiple choice questions. So I had to read this entire textbook several times and look up all the answers and make sure it's in the book and make sure the questions were right and categorize the questions and do all that. And that was a lot of work. Okay. So I know a lot about this book. Okay. So my advice for reading your textbook. First of all, remember the turkey. You aren't going to read a whole chapter in a day. Small bites. So we're going to approach chapter 1 and not read it in one night. And if you take a look at the structure of these chapters, and I strongly recommend that you do, you'll see that the authors broke the chapter up. And that those subsections might be something for you to do, sort of one subsection each night for maybe 7 or 8 nights. As you're starting a chapter, and this is a mistake students often make, they just start out by reading the first page. No, that's not a good idea. Just browse the chapter. Don't feel like you've got a job to memorize stuff that you're seeing or to learn it all. Literally flip through the pages of the chapter that you need to read, and just look at anything interesting. Look at the photos. Stop wherever there's something interesting. Just kind of get engaged. If you just look at the pictures, the artwork, and the photos that are in the chapter, you get an idea. Okay, all right, so this is going to be about that. Oh, they're talking about that. Okay, well, I had that in high school. Oh no, wait a minute, I don't remember this. This looks new. I don't know anything about that. And so you just become familiar. It's a way to ease it in. It's an introduction. It's your own personal way of becoming familiar with the chapter. You get an idea of what the chapter's about, and looking at those photos and figures are a great way to do it. Now, reading the chapter, and this is what I'm talking about in these kinds of environments. You're not doing the whole chapter in one day. By the way, you should probably have the objectives off to your side. And as you're going through the chapter in order, it'd be good to look at the objectives, and as you read, you'll notice that those objectives get addressed. And then you'll want to write questions about the information that's needed to answer those objectives. Okay? What I recommend is you read one paragraph at a time. Now, this is important. This is really big. I'm giving you very specific advice, and lucky you, the whole lecture is recorded. Read one paragraph. Then you look away from the book. You look out a window if you can, and look at number 5. What on earth? Instead of concentrating and sweating and, I'm going to pound that information in my head. This should be the stunning step. And I want to talk to you about this. A couple years ago, I went to a scientific meeting, and my roommate was a professor of psychology at Blackburn. And I talked to him about exactly this. I said, I want to tell you how I tell students to read a chapter. And I want you to tell me whether or not that's consistent with the psychology that you know. And the answer was yes. So let me tell you about this. Oh my goodness, guys. How would you like to study and learn in an easier way? You read a paragraph. A paragraph, remember, I told you, is pretty much the way stuff is in biology. It's either an idea, it might be a definition, just going into a lot of detail, could be the parts of something, could be the steps of something. And I have to tell you, most paragraphs in a college science textbook are one of those things. A single definition of something, they're really trying to make sure you understand what that means. A concept that's really, really much more difficult to get across. Steps in something, parts of something. That's pretty much it. Okay. You read that one paragraph. It went into your mind, right? You're concentrating. You're not distracted. Of course, if you're distracted, then this isn't going to work. You read the paragraph, then you look out the window and think of nothing. What do you think is happening when you look out the window and you're not concentrating on anything? You're not trying to recall what you read, guys. I'm telling you, literally. So some of you, and if you're like me, have practice thinking about nothing. Okay? You may have had times when you've really been mentally working hard and you just kind of find yourself staring and you notice that you're not thinking about anything and you're just staring, and maybe a little drool comes out of your mouth, a little saliva dribbles out, and it feels good. It feels good because you're not doing anything. You're really resting. Yeah, I call it brain farting. Yeah, it's my last semester here, so I can say a word like that. I call it brain farting. Guys, boy, oh boy, it's a real relief. All right. Well, that's what you want to be doing. That's what you want to be doing here, guys. Every paragraph you get to brain fart, okay? But let me tell you what's really happening. In a level of your mind, you are processing information and you aren't aware of it. Now, I want to show you how you know that's true. I'm not telling you something new. You know it's true, but you might not have thought of it. Have you ever tried to think of somebody's name or a date? And it's right there. You just go, it's right on the tip of my tongue. Whatever. You're with somebody and go, oh no, hold on. And as you get to be an old guy like me, you worry that people think you're losing your memory. So it makes me really nervous. I'm like, oh no, it's right there. I got that person. They were in my zoology class 2 years ago. Wait a minute. I'm coming up with a name. and usually you can't think of it. But then when you go on and now talk about something else and you stop trying to think of it, it comes to you. So, my question to you guys, how is that possible? You stopped trying to remember the name or the date. How on earth did it suddenly come to you? And the answer is subconscious processing. That parts of our mind process information, help to integrate new stuff with old stuff. And you're not aware of it. So read a paragraph, stop. Now, how long are you stopping? If I tell you a couple hours, you're going to go, whoa, that's pretty good. Nope. The answer is about 10 seconds, maybe 15 seconds. The thing is, and this is really kind of a fun thing, when I started doing this, after I did it a while, I had a good feeling of when I was done thinking about nothing. I don't know, maybe I got anxious to move on and do another paragraph, but I kind of look up, okay, all right. It'd be about 10 seconds. And then I was ready for another bite. So back to my turkey analogy, guys. And now I'm going to help you. If you get invited to dinner at the White House, good for you. By the way, send me a little email or put it on Facebook. Let me know, because that'd be really cool. You should know that really good manners for eating in a very formal dinner, and I learned this from my wife because I didn't know. You pick up your fork, you spear something, if that's what you're using, a fork. You put the food in your mouth, the bite in your mouth. Then, listen, you put the fork down. Look. You pick the fork up and take a bite. Then you put the fork down. These steps. And what do? Just like subconscious thinking, you chew. You process what you took in. And then you swallow, and then you're ready to repeat. Okay? Within 10 to 20 seconds, you'll feel ready for another paragraph. And if you're eating, you'll pick up the fork and take another bite. Now, most of us don't put down the fork in between bites, but I'm told that that's proper manners. Look at your objectives, see what's object on that, identify anything in the paragraph that addresses an objective, make a note and somehow of that, and it'd be good maybe to start writing questions about that information. If note cards or on a Quizlet, on your app or something, or physically on a note card, whatever. Okay. One of my first students to get into the top physical therapy school in the country, which happens to be Washington University in St. Louis. One of my first students to do that used note cards. And she took those note cards with her everywhere. And so she would review note cards in the 5 or 10 minutes in between classes. There's all kinds of little short periods of time in your day when you could study. So she'd come, she'd sit down in the seat for my class, and I'd watch her reviewing her note cards. Or you could be flipping through the app on Quizlet or whatever works for you. She told me one day that she was in line in the dining hall, getting ready to go in, and they were all lined up, and she's reviewing the note cards, and people started giving her a hard time. And I said, her name's Libby. I said, Libby, did those people want to go and get a doctorate in physical therapy? And she said, oh. I said, well, I'll tell you, the answer is no, because my advisees, if you're interested in that I would be your advisor. So the answer is no. And so it turns out what she was doing was important for her, and what you need to be doing for this class is not determined by what another major. I won't pick another major, but maybe a psychology major, or maybe an English major, right? Or maybe an art major. They have their own things that they have to do. And you, in turn, might look kind of like a nerd if that's something that worries you, and quizzing and stuff and whatever. And then it's kind of a usual good thing, a little joke to add here. What do you call a nerd in 4 years? 4 years from now, what's a nerd? And the answer is boss. Okay, they're going to be somebody's boss. Why? Because they did their work. Okay, And generally speaking, in the world, doing a good job helps you to get promoted. Okay. So, as you're quizzing yourself, as you're preparing questions and all this, you can take those questions with you and then you can study them regularly. Okay. Make a note card, put the answer on the back, take the note cards with you. Quizlet does this as an app. Rinse and repeat, just like shampoo. Okay. Guys, that's it. Please go take a look at the details on the As You Begin document. I'm telling you, this is pretty much it. I have another exercise. We're going to analyze some data. The next lecture, I'm going to show you some really neat data, and we're going to study it and speculate about it. And I promise you it's relevant to all of you, and it's also relevant to how you study. But this is pretty much the end. Lucky you, you've got it recorded, and you can come back if you think that'd be helpful. But I'm just telling you, in a month or two, if you come back to me and somehow you haven't been doing well, and you say to me somewhat desperately, and I feel bad for you, you'll say, gosh, Doctor, I'm really frustrated. Do you have any suggestions? And you know what the answer is going to be. Go to YouTube and look at the lectures where I talk about how to study. I wish you all the best of luck. I sure hope that we get to be in person next time. Bye-bye.